As for Australia's role, it was inevitable that that phase where Southeast Asia consisted of small and vulnerable economies, and with weak armed forces, that phase had to go. And your capacity of intervention in any major conflict, even within the region, is now more limited. In the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, even up to the beginning of the 70s, your projection of forces could have deterred any conflict or helped, together with the British and the New Zealanders, could have prevented the conflict. Now the British have withdrawn. The New Zealanders don't want to have an air force. And I don't see the Australians alone being able to influence the outcome of conflict in the region.
Interesting. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Former Minister and Mentor, I'm Nabil Fahmy from Egypt. I have two very short questions. In our discussions today, we discussed at some length the issue of a bipolar world versus a multipolar world. I'm curious to your opinion.
A what world?
A multipolar world or a bipolar world. In your opinion, is a multipolar world more secure or a bipolar world? The second question, what do you see as the most acute problem facing the world in the next 10 years?
Those are small questions, you said?
Short. I said short.
Short, okay.
Whether it's more dangerous to have a bipolar or multipolar world depends upon the third pole. Bipolar world is more secure. Both sides have weapons of mass destruction that prevents a conflict. If you have a third pole that also has weapons of mass destruction, but with different objectives, then you'll cause problems, because you've got to side with one side or the other, or you may create a completely different side, and that will create tensions between the three. So I would imagine that the bipolar world is more secure. What was your second question?
What is the most acute problem you see facing the world in the next 10 years?
I have no crystal ball.
It sounds like you see a number of problems. That it's a wealth of problems rather than a dearth of problems. Yes, sir.
Mr. Minister, Mentor Minister, my name is Pranay Gupte. I'm originally from India. I've interviewed you in the past. May I ask you one question about Singapore's message? In the past, the perception always was that Singapore's model was that of disciplined capitalism, and it certainly worked for Singapore. After the last election, where so many forces were at work, what is the new message that Singapore has in terms of the continuum, in terms of its record, the present, and what you anticipate to be the future of your diverse multicultural society? Thank you, sir.
Well, what happened in the last elections was bound to happen anyway. Our total dominance was not sustainable. The younger generation wants to see competition, and they voted in an opposition party. Whether it will stop just with competition, or will go on to a desire to have a two-party system is another matter. It depends upon the performance of the opposition and the response of the government. And the mindset of succeeding younger generations that comes with every general election every 5 years.
Could I ask a question perhaps about America?
He wants to ask.
Oh, have I missed one here? Yes, sir, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Mentor Minister, this is Francisco Tata, former Minister and Senator from the Philippines. It's a great pleasure to see you again, sir. The question has to do with the global war on terror. After the 10th anniversary of G11, I listened to the lectures of Baroness Eliza Manningham-Buller, the former Director General of MI5. In the 3 lectures, he made at least 3 points. First point, that there's no justification for going to Iraq. Second point was there is no justification for the use of torture in fighting terrorism. And the third point, on security and freedom, she says that one is not opposed to the other. One must always go with the other. The question is, how would this point of view, coming from its source, impact the global war on terror?
I wouldn't like to have a clash of ideas with the head of MI5 or MI6. She stated her view. I think she's supposed to be an expert in the field. I'm not an expert in the field, but I have my own views.
There are 2 questions on this side. Perhaps we could have a microphone. The gentleman in the front and then behind.
Minister, thank you so much. Jonathan Oppenheimer, De Beers from South Africa. Really just to ask your opinion of Africa's role in the global economy in the next 10, 15 years, and particularly if you would have any advice to African governments as to how to maximize their role compared to the globe.
Are you talking about South Africa or the whole of Africa?
Both, sir.
Sorry?
Both.
Well, the whole of Africa consists of very different stages of economic development and therefore different capacity to influence developments in the world. The rest of Africa, apart from South Africa and a few of the more industrialized nations, their strength is in the export of raw materials, and you don't have the capacity to influence or project your ideas across the globe. For South Africa, and in the old days perhaps Namibia together with South Africa, you could dominate the southern African continent, but now with increasing preoccupations with African problems, I think your interest in world affairs is no longer what it was. I mean, in the days of apartheid, you had to be interested in the world because of the gathering momentum against apartheid. Now nobody is for or against the new government of President Jacob Zuma. So South Africa continues in its own way to grow itself into a developed state.
Thank you. Yes, the gentleman at that table.
Good evening, former Minister Minister Lee. My name is Anselm Chu from Global Youth Congress in Singapore. I'm born in the year of 1967. First of all, I'd like to, on behalf of many of my friends and even the youth leaders in Singapore, I'd like to thank you for all your good governance and also wish you very good health. And the young people in Singapore, especially and in the region, has always looked forward to a rise of Asia And in the course of my work, many young leaders have expressed that they hope one day Asia will become truly a power in the world and has a big role to play in the world. So may I ask you, in your perspective, when do you think this could be possible? Because right now, the economic power of Japan and the rising China and India, these are all in economic sense. When do you foresee will be a time where the Asia bloc can truly have equivalent or perhaps a more equitable political power in the world, especially in the United Nations?
Why do you believe there's an Asia bloc? I don't believe in that.
Okay, maybe let me rephrase it. Not so much the Asia bloc, but rather, the collective Asian countries. Yeah.
No, I do not see a coalition of Asian countries with the same objectives. I think India and China has got more preoccupations with each other than with the rest of the world. And it goes also for a lot of other countries. If you look at the disputes over the border that arose after the 1962 clash, Arunachal Pradesh is still not settled. And I think that's high on the agenda of both India and China. So I do not see a confluence of forces that will make Asia act as a bloc. It's just not possible. It's as if you're asking Latin Americans or Africans to act as a bloc, which has not happened and will not happen.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Do you think there's any scope for a tighter economic bloc amongst Asian countries, a bit like the North America Free Trade Group, or indeed the European Union began as a trading bloc?
Yes, but who do we sign up with? South Africa? Or the whole of the African continent? Or individually? And there are over 50 countries, of whom probably about a dozen are worth having free trade agreements with.
And of course, Singapore already has free trade agreements itself with all of the major countries.
It will not add very much to the volume of world trade because they are exporters mainly of raw materials, and their trade is with China more than any other country. The Chinese need the raw materials, and they're there in strength, and building roads, bridges, railways, in return, convention centers, even palaces for the presidents.
Yes, the lady in the front, please.
I'm Major General Yao Yingzhu from China. Thank you very much for your very positive assessment about China's future. My question to you is what, in your view, are the greatest challenge to China if it is going to continue its rise? And what are your advice to China to face and overcome the obstacle, to face the challenge and overcome the obstacle? Thank you.
I think the biggest problem in China is the widening income gap between the coastal provinces and the inland provinces. And within the coastal provinces and the cities themselves, the income gaps between